Welcome to the Cool Fireman Podcast, a virtual firehouse kitchen table with Matt, Adam, Brian, Doug, and Freddy, where they discuss everything that matters in today's fire service. Now let's get to the show.
Good times. Good times. You know what I just noticed? I am the one guy who does not have the West Broad hat on.
Unbelievable.
I do not have the hose
I
hat.
already noticed it.
Unbelievable. Unacceptable.
Matt could care
But I do
less.
have the Unkies on. So shout out to Unkies, the Burn Box, and West Broad, all of our friends on the podcast here at the Cool Fireman Podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of the Cool Fireman Podcast. You've got 4 out of the 5. I want to say special happy anniversary to Adam and his wife.
Aww.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why they're not on the show, or he's not on the show, not they. Elizabeth is not always on the show. Thank you, Matt, for that. That was very nice. That cough right in it. I mean, it could have been a Triscuit box or something. I mean,
Sorry, I thought I hit mute, but I guess I didn't.
I'm just doing a jab any which way you go. So, but while we're talking about that, apologies, may or may not be in order for our listeners on a future episode or not. But either way, for any shenanigans that you may or may not hear in the future. So we've been knocking out several podcasts here in the last day or two. So anyways, we're hard charging. I'm Brian from East Coast Kelly's. We got Doug, Freddy, and Matt. Y'all be sure to go follow us on all of our socials, whether it's Big City Doug, What's a Rolfie, or Fireman Freddy, and of course, Unkies. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you have been listening, we're doing a little bit different modified. We're going to go to the 30-minute episodes here, the best that we can. Horseshoes and hand grenades, close, right? Thereabouts. And so we're going to do a little housekeeping on the front end. And one of the things that we're asking is 2 calls to action. We're going to put them in the episode, but also ask that you let us know by emailing thecoolfireman@gmail.com and give us feedback on our show. What do you like? What don't you like? What would you want to see different? Those kind of things. So how's everybody doing today before we get into the other parts of it?
Good,
Nice.
Doing great. Dude,
Very nice.
I'm coming off a 4-date, man. I'm a little loopy.
Yeah, Freddy's doing good. Matt?
I totally screwed up, and I'm not even using the right microphone. That's the problem.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Killing me. So you
I
went to
know.
mute earlier when you coughed and you just didn't. You just
Right. That's why you guys heard it. That's okay. Hey, it won't let me change it now, I guess. I don't know. Well, maybe it
That's
will.
all good. That's all good.
Yeah.
So, we talked about our sponsors. We talked about us. The other thing that we do every single week is we do a moment of silence. So we want to pay respects to all that may have been lost in the line of duty, as well as the family members who are making it every single day without their loved ones. And we want to just pay homage to them and give a moment of silence to those. So let's do that right
And
now.
a special shout out to my folks up here in Henrico, neighboring county. Had a tragic loss last week, I believe it was. May have been 2 weeks ago. Just had the funeral the other day. So thinking of them folks.
Yep, for sure.
Well said.
Well said.
Matt's favorite line. Well said. All right. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the evolution and just the current state of EMS in the fire service. We hint around a little bit about this in a lot of our shows, but we don't always, and we haven't dedicated an episode to this. So we decided what better thing to do than to talk about that. One of our comments recently talked about somebody who was getting their oral boards done. And so it got us thinking about kind of our makeup of certifications. And so myself and Adam, we're EMT basics, but Doug, Freddy, and Matt are all paramedics. So I'm going to kind of moderate today, and these guys are going to kind of chime in and give some feedback. Because I know there's a national standard, but I really want to know, what is it like today versus when you first got started providing medic care, and then really kind of reflect back on the stories that you've heard in agencies that have it as well of what it was like years ago. So Doug, you want to start out?
Sure. When I started out 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago now, I had no medical training. I took probably a month of an EMT class in 1997, I think it was. So my department will train all that stuff, so it's not a problem. So we split our class kind of in half. half of my class, I was a pretty big recruit school. Half of us were already EMTs and the other half weren't. So the half of us started just a month sooner than everybody else. Got all EMT'd up and whatnot. Everybody here is required to be a minimum of an EMT because we're a dual purpose agency. We do fire and EMS. And of course we offer a pay incentive to be a paramedic, and that's increased throughout the years. But I've been a paramedic now for 4 years. I just thought it would be better for my development and my career in general, just to broaden my horizons and gain some knowledge. Obviously, the pay is nice. Anybody who says they don't do it for the money, I think, is lying. But yeah, so it's a drastic need, and it's becoming worse. It's probably nationwide at this point. The city of Richmond doesn't have. They do first response EMS stuff, but they don't technically provide EMS. Richmond Ambulance Authority does that. However, RASI, as we call them, Richmond is really struggling to keep employees, it sounds like, and recruit employees. So it sounds like Richmond may be turning the corner on that and catching up with the trend of, look, man, it's something you got to embrace. And, it is what it is. There's the single role fire department agencies are becoming few and far between. Obviously, the bigger cities that can support an EMS agency can probably still handle that. But good Lord, the wind is blowing here. Sorry, my curtains are blowing everywhere out here on the casting couch.
6 minutes to get off the rails.
Doug, before you move on, are you guys... Doug, to bring it back, do you guys transport at your department?
Yes,
I know
we are a transport agency. Yes. Let's see. We have 21 or 22 full-time stations, and I think all but 2 of them have ambulances in them. I think just 12 and 13. I think is the only 2 full-time career stations, and we have some volunteer stations. They don't have ambulances. Volunteer fire agencies stations, excuse me. But I'm pretty sure we have 20 or 21 ambulance transport units that are staffed daily.
So, and just so I can get a pulse of the proportion based off of what you said, what do you think the number of medics per shift? On a recent episode, you shared that there's about 100 per shift of firefighters. So how many of those 100 are paramedics?
I could get you that number. I wish I known we were talking about this before today. I could have had those numbers. But we have a pretty large number of paramedics. A lot of our paramedics work in day work, and we have a community paramedicine program that takes up a lot of our paramedics. We have a lot of supervisors who have been and still are ALS providers that have moved on into day work positions, that kind of thing. But number-wise, I don't know, 40%. It sounds about right, department-wide. And we try to balance that out per shift. We have one of my rookies at the station now. I have 2 from the same recruit school. One of them is in our current paramedic program. They test out in April or May, I think. So he's almost done. And we'll probably start another program after that. We recently got accredited to host our own paramedic program. But again, because of the day work stuff and the supervisors, you can never have enough ALS. So we're constantly trying to recruit and encourage our existing employees to go through the program.
Would you say that you have at least a medic at each station and at each shift?
It's required.
It's required. Okay.
Yes. We have to, every engine has to be ALS, whether that be a paramedic or we still have a few, EMT intermediates that are hanging around that didn't take the IDP bridge. But yes, every fire engine, every station has to have at least one ALS provider per shift, because every engine first out has to be ALS. We can run a BLS ambulance transport unit, but the engines right now have to be ALS.
And will you, if it's an ALS call and it's a BLS ambulance, will that medic get on the ambulance and shut the engine down?
It depends.
Right. I mean, if it warrants it, if the call warrants
we
it. We
use what's a system called ProQA to distinguish the acuity of our calls, and they're dispatched accordingly. And if it's dispatched as an ALS call, you'll get an engine. If it's a BLS transport unit for the day, you get an engine and the ambulance. And the ALS provider then makes an assessment and decides whether he or she needs to ride with that ambulance. If that engine has somebody that can ride the front seat and act, you can mark it down BLS and run it either as a crew of 2 or typically what will happen is somebody will get off of the ambulance to make it a full 3-person engine, and then
I got you.
the other person will ride with the paramedic on the ambulance.
The goal is to never shut the engine down.
Correct. The goal is ideally to never take it out of service, but again, with acting officer vacancies becoming more and more prevalent in my department, because our development program has kind of, I don't want to say not disallowed it, but it used to be to advance in firefighter development, you had to ride the front seat. Well, we've kind of gotten away from some of that. So guys can get raises now and move forward in the development without riding the front seat. So we probably have just as many, if not more, acting officer vacancies as we do paramedic or ALS vacancies. But yes, the goal is to ideally keep that unit in service if we can, even though we have a copious amount of fire engines. If we can
Doug, you're going to shut down an engine if it's only got 2 people?
Gotcha.
It depends. If nobody can ride the front seat, it has to. If we don't have an acting officer, it has to. We do have an acting officer and you have a cleared driver, because again, that's a problem we have with so many newer guys that they may not be cleared to operate the fire engine by themselves yet through their DPO program, MPO program. If we have a cleared driver and a cleared acting officer, that unit can stay in service as a crew of 2 until that provider gets back. If it's a close enough hospital, they will follow the ambulance to the hospital and pick up that person rather than waiting for the ambulance to bring them back, because that puts both units back in service. So now the ambulance, instead of staying out of service to take that person home.
All of our engines run 2.
Yeah. What, to stay?
Yeah.
Is that all the time though?
And I'll be honest with you, without taking this on a side tangent, it's something that I'm sure you guys have seen me been posting about it like crazy, but we have a House bill right now in Michigan that's trying to bring back mandatory bargaining of minimum staffing, because Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio have double the staffing per 100,000 residents that Michigan has, and it's egregious. But that's just wild that it would possibly take an engine out of service if it didn't have 3 for you, which is where every day we run 2 on an engine, and it's according to Michigan, that's staffed. Which we know is which we know is understaffed.
You guys
completely, but
this actually happened on Saturday. I was working an overtime shift. We got dispatched on a fire alarm with an engine. I was riding a ladder truck. The engine had dropped a ALS provider to go to the hospital. So if you are understaffed as a crew of 2 and you're still responding because you're still in service, because you've got a cleared driver and a cleared acting officer, which they did, you have to announce to dispatch, hey, we're responding as an understaffed crew of 2. So they know that if it's something that needs staff or personnel, they know to immediately trigger and send another unit.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Freddy, you guys run 2 staff.
Yep.
You guys run 2 people on your engines at all times. And then you guys just have like RAs or
that's part of the
ambulances that have the paramedics on them?
Like yesterday I was the ladder driver.
Yeah.
Friday I was the ambulance driver. And then tomorrow when I go on shift, I drive the squad. So we're all over the place. But all of our apparatus are staffed with 2, and that's it. And we're all paramedics except for one lieutenant is a basic, and he was hired on before paramedic was mandatory. And it's kind of just been we're not going to make you, and he's not going to do it, and he's going to retire in 3 years. It's just one of those things where he just doesn't have to. But if you're riding with him on a vehicle, you're a limited, because it goes to the limit, the lower licensure. At least in Michigan, it does. So
Not here. We can staff.
So he
an
doesn't ride
ALS
the ambulance
with a basic and
so
a medic.
That's what we do.
Right. No, but I was going to say, but I mean, it can happen here, and that's how they were able to maintain medic staffing, like they were during COVID, was by hiring a bunch of basics, promising them the world. And I'm saying they being just the EMS systems here. When you had this mass exodus of come into work in EMS and you can become a basic. And so for the folks who stayed medics, that's how there was no drop in services, right? Because that's what they did. They basically shifted to one medic and one basic, and they kept all their ALS units up. So
that's every day for us. It's very rare.
We have medic basic
ALS
trucks. We absolutely have medic basic ambulances in the county, like privates and stuff like that. But for the most part, most fire departments, if not all, that transport are medic. It's almost like they won't run medic basic.
You have to wonder about the cost associated with that. And that's for another show. So, Freddie, why don't you go ahead and answer those questions that Doug did? And I hope that those questions that I asked Doug, maybe you can answer again without having me having to repeat.
I've been a paramedic that's okay. Now, coming up on 18 years. I started out with a private ambulance where we did run, when I was a basic, going through the medic school, we ran medic basic. When I got my paramedic license, I actually went to the fire academy because I wanted to get onto a fire department. Primarily, I didn't want to work for a private ambulance. So when I started at my first department, it was medic. Everybody on the department was medic. They would not hire anybody who wasn't a paramedic. And for me, being the new guy, I did all of the reports. I didn't ride an engine. I didn't ride. That department, you jumped trucks. If you were out at Station 2 between an ambulance, an engine, and a ladder, depending on the call that came in. But if I was at Station 1, I was the tech on the ambulance until I had people underneath me on my shift. And we were all paramedics. And any call at that first department was just an ambulance, unless it was a confirmed code. If it was a confirmed code, then the engine would roll with us, which was also staffed with 2 paramedics. At my new department, which I actually like, is we rotate all over the place. Like, I'll be out at Station 2, I'll be at Station 1. You never, I say never, but it's not true. But you never ride the same truck 2 shifts in a row. There's obviously extenuating circumstances and what have you, but we do hire basics and we put them through the medic program. But then if we have a basic, they go on the engine or the ladder. So realistically, it's funny to think, and we joke about it, but if you're a basic, you actually not get promoted, but you don't have to ride the ambulance ever if you're a basic.
Yeah.
But then when you pass all your medic stuff, you literally ride the box for probably 6 months, and they might sprinkle in an engine or a ladder shift for you. But we want to make sure that you're getting as many patient touches and patient interactions as you can.
If you fail the medic portion,
because
do you
just
lose
had
your job?
A guy who didn't pass the national registry 3 times, had to take the refresher, and he passed it on the 4th time. So, and it was a lot of like, hey man, you're good, but pass, please. Like, the chief did not want to have to pull the trigger on anything like that. So
meanwhile, he's going, I'm trying over here. Okay.
Like, I'm not trying to fail it.
So, for us, every single call that comes in that is medical based, with the exception of a lift assist, an ambulance and a secondary vehicle goes to it. So at our Station 1, we have one of those mini pumpers that's on the F 550, I think it is, but it's a squad. We call it our squad. Some people call it a brush truck or whatever. But so we send 4 paramedics, unless the 1 lieutenant's on, 4 paramedics to every single call. And we are pushing hard because we want that 3rd person on the ladder, engine, and the squad to add 3 personnel per shift, because then 5 paramedics on scene, even with a Lucas device right now, 5 paramedics on a scene would be incredible. Yeah.
Let me interrupt for just a second. So I just told you that Engine Medic House, for instance, It's staffed at 5 people a day. There's 3 on the engine, 2 on the ambulance. And it's only required for 1 paramedic to be there, 1 ALS provider to be there. I have been to cardiac arrest as the only ALS provider with 5 other people there with me. 5 BLS providers and me. I can't imagine going to every call with at least 3 paramedics. That is amazing.
And that's where it's weird, because I am jealous as shit of your staffing, and meanwhile you're like,
and I'm jealous of yours in that regard. He's like, oh, we just jump out with 5 paramedics.
And Lucas.
What?
And Lucas.
Jesus.
But
well, thank God we have those.
I personally think that paramedicine in the fire service, the integrated, the dual role, I think personally it's saved a lot of jobs within the fire service, because Brian can speak 1,000% to it, is houses are getting safer, fires are getting less and less responded to, I guess you could say. And so the call volume was going down, and everybody knows that 85% of call volume usually on a fire department is some type of medical based. Yes. So
prevention is
I
working.
believe that the integration of paramedics, paramedic firefighters, firefighter paramedics, whatever you want to call it, I think it's actually saved a lot of jobs within the fire service, because you need that personnel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's unique that you say that, because in my department, we literally had gotten our annual reporting in for the fiscal year, and we're doing just as many prevention related activities as we are responses to calls. So it's unique that you say that, because of the growth that we're seeing, and that's kind of the clarity that we talked about before that would probably help people understand. Matt, how about you in Laguna Beach, California? I mean, y'all have been doing paramedicine. Y'all are the ones who started it, California. Rampart, right? D5W, talk to us about that from the California perspective.
Johnny and Roy, baby. Johnny and Roy.
Yeah.
LA County started it. I would say in Orange County, the paramedic services started like sometime late 70s. They'd bring the box, and then they would open the box and take the phone. They would ring the down ring, or whatever they call it, to the hospital, and they'd talk to the nurse or doctor. But it's evolved like crazy, especially in our county. So our surrounding counties do things a little bit different. So San Diego, where I live, I work in Orange County, and then you got Riverside County, San Bernardino County, LA County. They all have a lot of private paramedics that work for private ambulance companies. Everybody's familiar with AMR. It's probably the largest in the country, right? Or even really globally, I think.
Yeah.
But Orange County, we've really fought to hold, in order to be a paramedic in my county that I work for, you have to be a firefighter. And that's just the way it is. There is one city that finally broke the threshold years ago. And I won't even mention their names, but paramedicine has been highly politicized where I work. And so I won't even get into that. But things have evolved like crazy.
Great.
Fred.
You all right there, Fred?
You okay? A lot of noise, Freddy.
What's really evolved is I started out in a private ambulance company working as an EMT, because in Orange County, you can't work for a private ambulance company and be a paramedic. So, and just the way that the private industry has worked in as like an ambulance company, it's all for profit. So that's the only thing I can say, right? They work for the bottom line. And so I'm not going to sit here on a soapbox and bash anybody. I'm not going to get into politics, but it has become very highly politicized where I work, trying to keep paramedics in the fire service and not use private paramedics. We all love being paramedics. I love being a paramedic. Do I do it I get 15% raise. Yeah, it's the largest raise that you'll get in my department. Basically where I work, we have 4 engines. 2 of the 4 engines are full ALS, which means 2 medics on each engine. And then the other 2 engines are called PAUs, paramedic assessment units, where you're only required to have, per the county, you're only required to have 1 medic on those engines. But if a call goes out in that engine's first in, then they have to send one of us. So there's 3 medics on that call. It's mandatory in our county that there's at least 2 medics on scene and transporting.
God, that's awesome.
We can do single medic escort. It's kind of like this gray area right now with us. But we have a lot going on. There's a transition going on in our department where we're trying to go to 4.0 staff on one of our engines. And so we're trying to figure out, if we send a single, then the engine can stay in service as a PAU because of that second medic, or if there's 2 medics on it, you're a full medic in it. It's very, convoluted and complex, but it's definitely evolved. It's definitely evolved. But I mean, when you get down to the brass tacks, we have to have 2 medics on scene at all times. And so sometimes there's 2 engines and an ambulance that show up to these people's houses and they go, "Oh my gosh, you brought the whole cavalry," and it's like, well, yeah, but she's like, "I just fell on the ground." Well, yeah, but what if you were dead? Or what if you were caught, 10 feet down? I mean, then what are you going to do? We're going to call more resources. I mean, we gotta, we got to kind of prepare for the worst, if you will, so
hope for the best.
I love being a paramedic. One thing that we're trying to do is take paramedic out of rank. Like, we're trying to get, once you promote to captain, then you're not a medic anymore. But the problem is, as all 12 captains right now are medics. So to do that, it's going to take a long time.
It's a natural progression,
Yeah.
Guys who go through the paramedic program are historically, guys and girls, are more motivated to self-train and that kind of thing. And they're the people who typically promote.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, because I know we're getting close here, Brian, is I do believe in paramedics in the fire service. I mean, where I work, we don't have a lot of volunteers, so it might change. It might be different where you guys work, because you guys, work a lot with the volunteers. But I think, I don't want to say I'm not here to get on my soapbox or anything, but we do deliver a high level of service as professional firefighters providing paramedic services. And that's the only thing I'll say. But I do believe in it. Whereas, you're going to get some guys listening to this podcast and be like, "Oh, F that, man." Like these nurses, or these, what do they call us, para healers, or your healing hands, like, get out of here. I just want to break shit and put out fire. But what Freddy said is, 80% of our calls are medical based. So it's like, what are you going to do? I mean, I really highly believe what you said, Doug, is prevention is working. I mean, we're running less fires.
I'm not going on a limb to say that my department, we're probably closing in on 90% EMS.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yes,
we're
fire
about
prevention is working.
Oh yeah.
We're getting smarter about things, and the technology is getting better, and it's just, Brian.
I mean, look at new home builds. Brian,
Yeah, again, a whole nother tangent, but yes, Brian is the subject matter expert on that. But it's working,
right?
Well, and that's
the
for another
population is just getting sicker.
Well, I was going to say, that's definitely for a different podcast for sure, and we could talk about how that is the perception, the perception. Well, that is the perception, but there are concerns with that. There is some short-term gains, long-term losses with the current builds. So we'll put a pin in that. That's for another episode. I can geek out. I can nerd alert for that.
Speaking of nerd, let me interject real quick, Brian. Another part of my county is we keep a lot of data, and our average age is increasing every year of our population. Like, obviously it increases naturally, but like it goes up, like our 65 and up population every year, like, increases our senior population. So that's going to generate more call volume. It's just natural.
You're saying people get older every year?
Right. Every year, our population gets older by a year.
So I want to give the 2-minute version of what my history of my community, of what I've experienced. Again, I'm a basic, but in my community, the paramedicine look was, when I joined in the late 90s, we had 2 medics on every ambulance. And that was the way it was for a very long time. It was supplemented by basics in a volunteer community. And so we rolled that way for a long time. And then shortly thereafter, there was a dissolution of the volunteer rescue squad service. And so firefighters took on the rescue and extrication piece, and the EMT supplemented by volunteers dissolved. COVID happened, and we saw a blend of both EMTs and basics on trucks. And now we see basic trucks and medic trucks in my communities, and we have medic QRVs. So it's kind of weird. Like, we can have a medic unit only, we can have a basic truck only, and we can have a medic QRV, not to mention the whole community paramedic program. And what I'm very excited to hear about in my community, and I know we don't have time to talk about it today, but we're at the point of where our medic units are carrying whole blood.
We just started.
And it is unreal.
Yeah.
And that was some cutting edge technology stuff that we did here.
I take that back. Our medic units are not. Our safety officer is, and you need to call for him as early as possible. But I fully see it going to all of our transport units, and it's been phenomenal.
So it's amazing. And when I look back on that, I think back to some of the very early calls. And again, I'm not a medic and I don't pretend to be. I just remember the first time I ever gave oxygen to somebody, and I watched their O2 stat come up, and how rewarding that was. And again, I haven't practiced in a long time. And I can only imagine what it must be like for you guys to be able to give those intervention skills and see that. So our call to action is drop a comment. Let us know how EMS has evolved in the community that you're in. Or if you're brand new, if you're one of those new young listeners that are listening and soaking all this in, let us know, how do you provide? Right? Like, how does your community provide, and where do you see it going, and how are you preparing for that as well?
Yeah,
so
I think we've shown how nationwide, from east to west and north, how different things are. So
sure,
yeah, I'd love to know how it varies where you're at, down south, northeast, wherever. Like, it's, I'd love.
You're 100%, Doug, but I mean, it's not even just northeast, southwest. I mean, for us, it's
globally
by county. I mean, just one county over, and they've got 20 more drugs that they can give. Than we can.
Wild.
They can. We're not even in our protocols. We're not allowed to intubate pediatric patients.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and that's
it's
all
different,
goes back,
just region to region. I can't imagine if we really sat down and had hours to talk about this, like what the differences are between the East and the West Coast.
Yeah.
I mean, that is massive.
Yeah.
I mean, medical directors that probably don't talk to each other very often, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like medical directors of different counties have monthly meetings. So that's could be like pretty mind blowing.
Yeah. So give us some feedback on that. Chime in.
Yeah, no doubt. And do us a favor, share this podcast with a friend, and, just kind of refer it, let people know that, we're here for.
Especially people in the private ambulance service.
Private ambulance service?
I'd love to hear that side of it.
Sure. And for just the sake of exposure on this, because, this show, we are designed and we want to give feedback for the guy that's fixing to walk out the door as a retiree, as well as for the new firefighter. And that's the way this podcast is designed to be. So if you go back and listen, we've got it for the rookie person all the way to the retiree. So that's who we try to be. We really are trying to be that firehouse kitchen table. So thank you guys. Tell a friend, share it, share our clips on social media. We'd love to be highlighted and tagged in your stories for our clips. And so that's our call to action for this week. And I guess I'll end it. So with that, roll it, Gigi.
Roll it, Gigi.
Before you leave, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and give these firemen a huge thumbs up. Also, make sure you check out thecoolfireman.com for more. Thanks!